Whew! Would you be willing to go over that cliff? Would you send your family over it? Financially, that's what we face as a country because of legislation passed by the Congress and the President last year. The law got its nickname from Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke when he said this to a congressional committee in February.
On January 1st, 2013, there's going to be a massive fiscal cliff of large spending cuts and tax increases.
First, let's see how we got here. For years, we as a country have been spending more than we make and putting the rest on the national credit card. Well, last year, we maxed that credit card out, and the President asked Congress to increase the limit on the national card. Let me draw you a picture of what that led to. Before Republicans in Congress would agree to increasing our national credit card limit, they wanted some kind of assurance that we would get our spending under control. They couldn't come to an agreement with the president on how to do that, so they decided to create something so distasteful to both parties that they would surely come up with a deal to avoid it. That's the law that created the fiscal cliff that goes into effect in January, sort of the legislative equivalent of cod liver oil. Google that one, kids. It includes nearly $500 billion in tax increases next year alone, the biggest tax hike in a single year in history. Your share of that tax increase depends on how much you make. Families that make $50,000 will pay about $2,000 more. Families that make $85,000 will pay another $3,500. And the big hammer will come down on families or small businesses that make $500,000. They'll pay an extra $120,000 next year. The problem is, even those tax hikes won't solve our deficit and debt conundrums. We would still be spending at least $600 billion more each year than we took in, on top of a debt of more than $16 trillion already, most of it to foreign countries, which means we would be spending as much as $1 trillion a year just on interest on the debt in 10 years. So the fiscal cliff law has automatic spending cuts too. About half of them would be from the defense budget, though defense spending accounts for fewer than $1 in $5 in our budget. Still, if we're going to balance our budget, eventually we're going to have to find a way to get our allies to help pay for the defense that we provide most of them. The U.S. defense budget is more than what the next 17 countries spend on defense combined. In effect, many of them live under the U.S. defense umbrella. But the real driver of our debt is healthcare spending. We only spent about $1 in $10 on healthcare in 1960. But then we created Medicare and Medicaid, and spending exploded. We now spend $1 in $4 on healthcare, and that will be $1 in $3 in the next decade. All those increases in spending at the same time that most of us pay less of our income in taxes. Middle-income Americans have gone from paying $1 in $5 that they earned in taxes in 1980 to $1 in $7 today. So how do we avoid going over that cliff? Well, it seems both sides are going to have to give. Republicans are going to have to find a way to increase what we all pay in taxes, and Democrats are going to have to understand that we just can't spend as much money as we've been doing in the past. Our role as voters is to understand that both sides had to give something, and maybe think twice before we throw our representatives over the electoral cliff. At Hanging Rock State Park, Bob Buckley, Fox 8 News.